The gunshot that ended Samuel Hicks's life echoed through the Arizona Territory settlement of Weaverville, California, on a blistering afternoon in August 1882. And Tanner Knox knew before he reached the homestead that his best friend was already gone. He rode hard, his horse's hooves kicking up clouds of dust that hung in the scorching air, the urgent message from Doc Matthews still crumpled in his fist. By the time he dismounted outside the small clapboard house at the edge of town, the silence told him everything he needed to know. Inside, the scene was exactly as he had feared. Samuel lay still on the blood-soaked floor, a victim of the same range dispute that had been brewing for months. But Tanner's attention was immediately drawn to the bed in the corner where Catherine Hicks sat, her face pale as death itself, her hands trembling as she clutched her swollen belly. 8 months pregnant and widowed in the span of a heartbeat. Her eyes met his, empty and hollow, and Tanner felt something crack inside his chest. "He fought them off," Catherine whispered, her voice barely audible. "He saved me. He saved the baby, but he couldn't save himself." Tanner crossed the room and knelt beside Samuel's body, his throat tight with grief. They had ridden together for 7 years, worked cattle drives from Texas to Montana, survived stampedes and storms and everything the frontier could throw at them. Samuel had been more than a friend. He had been a brother. Doc Matthews arrived moments later, taking one look at Samuel before shaking his head. "I came as fast as I could. I am sorry, Tanner. I am truly sorry." The funeral was held 2 days later on a hill overlooking the valley. Catherine stood beside the grave, supported by her friend Kendra Kimball, a young woman who had come west from Missouri just 6 months earlier. Tanner had seen Kendra around town, always helping at the church or bringing supplies to families in need. She was 22 years old with dark auburn hair and eyes the color of whiskey in sunlight. She wore a simple gray dress, her arm around Catherine's shoulders as the preacher spoke words that seemed to vanish into the hot wind. Tanner couldn't take his eyes off Catherine. She looked like she might collapse at any moment, her skin translucent, her breathing shallow. She had always been delicate, but now she seemed to be fading before his eyes. Doc Matthews had pulled him aside earlier that morning with grave news. "The shock has been too much for her system," the doctor had said quietly. "Combined with the complications from the pregnancy, I do not think she has much time. A few weeks at most, maybe less." Now, watching her sway on her feet, Tanner felt the weight of helplessness crushing down on him. Samuel had saved Catherine from the men who had killed him, but Tanner could not save her from what was happening inside her own body. After the burial, most of the townspeople returned to their homes and businesses. Tanner helped Catherine and Kendra into the wagon and drove them back to the homestead. Catherine said nothing during the journey, her eyes fixed on some distant point on the horizon. Kendra held her hand, murmuring soft words of comfort that seemed to drift away unheard. The house felt too empty, too quiet. Tanner carried in supplies while Kendra helped Catherine to bed. He stood in the main room, looking at the place where Samuel had fallen. Someone had cleaned the floor, but Tanner could still see the stain beneath the rug that had been hastily thrown down. His hands clenched into fists. "Tanner," Kendra's voice pulled him from his dark thoughts. She stood in the doorway of the bedroom, her expression troubled. "She is asking for you." He followed her into the small room where Catherine lay propped against pillows, her face ghostly in the fading light. She gestured weakly for him to come closer, and he pulled a chair to her bedside, his hat in his hands. "Samuel loved you like a brother," Catherine said, her voice thin and strained. "He trusted you more than anyone in this world." "I loved him too," Tanner replied, his throat constricting. "I would have taken that bullet for him if I could have." Catherine's eyes filled with tears. "I know. That is why I am going to ask you something. Something that I have no right to ask, but I have no choice." She drew a shuddering breath. "I am dying, Tanner. Doc Matthews told me this morning. My heart is failing. The baby takes everything I have, and there is nothing left to keep me alive. I will not survive the birth." "Catherine, you cannot know that," Tanner protested, even though he knew the truth in his bones. "I do know it. I feel it every day, every hour. I am slipping away." She reached out and grabbed his hand with surprising strength. "But the baby might live. Doc Matthews thinks the baby has a chance if I can hold on long enough. But who will care for my child? Who will love Samuel's son or daughter when I am gone?" Tanner looked helplessly at Kendra, who stood near the window with tears streaming down her face. "The whole town will help," he said. "We will make sure the baby is cared for." "That is not enough," Catherine said fiercely. "My baby needs a mother, a real mother, someone who will love this child as their own." She turned her gaze to Kendra. "Come here, my dearest friend." Kendra moved to the other side of the bed, her hands shaking as she took Catherine's free hand. The two women looked at each other with the deep understanding that comes from true friendship. "Kendra has no family left," Catherine continued. "Her parents died of fever last winter. Her brothers went back east. She is alone in this world, just as my baby will be alone. But together they could have each other. They could be a family." She looked between Tanner and Kendra. "If you two were married." The words hung in the air like a physical thing. Tanner felt his heart stutter in his chest. He looked at Kendra, who had gone pale, her eyes wide with shock. "Catherine, you cannot ask this," Kendra whispered. "This is too much." "I can ask because I am dying and because I know both of your hearts," Catherine said. Her grip tightened on both their hands. "Tanner, you are the most honorable man I have ever known. You would be a good father, a good husband. And Kendra, you have so much love to give. You have been caring for people your whole life, putting everyone else before yourself. You would love my child." "I know you would." Tanner's mind reeled. Marry a woman he barely knew. Take on the responsibility of raising Samuel's child. It was insane. It was impossible. And yet, looking at Catherine's desperate face, he could not find the words to refuse her. "Think about it," Catherine pleaded. "Please. Both of you. I do not have much time, but think about it. For Samuel. For the baby." Tanner stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. "I need some air," he muttered and fled from the room. Outside, the sun was setting over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Tanner walked to the corral and leaned against the fence, his thoughts in turmoil. He was 30 years old, had spent his entire adult life drifting from one cattle drive to the next, never staying in one place long enough to put down roots. The idea of marriage, of family, of permanence, was foreign to him, terrifying even. But he had made a promise to himself at Samuel's graveside. He had sworn that he would do whatever it took to honor his friend's memory, to make sure Catherine and the baby were protected. He just had not imagined it would mean this. Behind him, he heard the soft sound of footsteps. He turned to find Kendra approaching, her arms wrapped around herself despite the heat. She stopped a few feet away, her eyes downcast. "I am sorry," she said quietly. "Catherine should not have put you in this position. It is not fair to ask such a thing of a stranger." "You are not a stranger," Tanner said, surprising himself. "I have seen you around town. You helped Mrs. Patterson when her husband died. You teach the children at the church on Sundays. You brought food to the miners when they were snowed in last winter." Kendra looked up at him, a faint flush coloring her cheeks. "You notice those things?" "I pay attention." He studied her face in the dying light. She was beautiful, he realized. Not in the flashy way of saloon girls, but in a quiet, steady way that seemed to grow the longer you looked. "What Catherine is asking is impossible. You know that, right? We do not know each other. We do not love each other. Marriage should not be a transaction." "I know," Kendra agreed. She was silent for a moment, then added, "But she is right about one thing. I am alone. And I do want a family someday, just not like this, not born from grief and desperation." Tanner found himself moving closer to her. "What if we talked about it? Really talked, I mean. Not because Catherine is asking, but because maybe we could find a way to make it work. For the baby. For Samuel." Kendra met his eyes, and he saw intelligence and strength there, along with the fear and uncertainty. "You would truly consider this?" "I gave Samuel my word that I would always protect Catherine. I was not there to save him, but maybe I can save what he left behind." Tanner ran a hand through his hair. "I am not saying yes, but I am not saying no either. Give me a few days to think. Can you do the same?" "Yes," Kendra said softly. "I can do that." They stood together in the gathering darkness, two people on the edge of a precipice, uncertain whether to step back or leap forward. Finally, Tanner cleared his throat. "You should go back inside. Catherine needs you." "I will stay out here and tend to the animals, then sleep in the barn." "Will you come by tomorrow?" Kendra asked. "Yes, I will bring supplies from town." She nodded and turned to go, then paused. "Tanner, thank you for not dismissing the idea outright. It means a lot to Catherine." "It means a lot to me too." After she left, Tanner stood alone in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the night settling in around him. Crickets sang in the grass. A coyote howled in the distance. The familiar sounds of the frontier, the only life he had ever known. Could he really give that up? Could he trade his freedom for a ready-made family with a woman he did not know? He thought about Samuel, about the way his friend's face had lit up when he talked about the coming baby. Samuel had been so happy, so full of hope for the future. Now that future was broken, shattered by violence and death. But maybe, just maybe, Tanner could piece together something from the fragments. The next morning, he rode into Weaverville proper as the sun climbed over the eastern ridges. The town was small but growing, with a main street lined with false-fronted buildings, a general store, a saloon, a church, and Doc Matthews's office. Tanner stopped first at the store, buying flour, sugar, coffee, and other essentials. Mrs. Henderson, who ran the store with her husband, gave him a sympathetic look. "Terrible thing about Samuel," she said as she wrapped his purchases. "He was a good man. And poor Catherine in her condition. How is she holding up?" "Not well," Tanner admitted. "Doc Matthews says her heart is weak." Mrs. Henderson shook her head sadly. "Such a tragedy. That baby is going to need a lot of help. The whole town will pitch in, of course, but it is not the same as having a real parent." Her words echoed Catherine's from the night before. Tanner paid for the supplies and loaded them onto his horse, then made his way to the doctor's office. Doc Matthews was a grizzled man in his 50s who had seen more than his share of death on the frontier. "Tanner," he greeted, looking up from the medical journal he was reading. "Come to ask about Catherine?" "Yes. How much time does she really have?" The doctor's expression grew grave. "Hard to say for certain. Her heart is struggling under the strain of the pregnancy. Every day that passes, she gets weaker. I am doing everything I can to keep her comfortable, but there is no medicine that can fix what is wrong. The kindest thing we can hope for is that she lives long enough to deliver the baby and that the child survives after that." He trailed off with a shrug. "And if she does not make it to term, then we lose both of them." Tanner felt a cold knot form in his stomach. "What about after the birth? If the baby lives, what will it need?" Doc Matthews studied him with keen eyes. "Why are you asking, Tanner? You planning on taking responsibility for Samuel's child?" "I am considering it." The doctor leaned back in his chair. "A newborn baby needs constant care. Feeding every few hours, day and night. Changing, bathing, keeping warm. It is exhausting work, and it cannot be done by one person alone. The child would need a mother, or at least a woman willing to take on that role. What if there was a woman? What if she was willing? Doc Matthews's eyebrows rose. You talking about Kendra Kimball? I heard Catherine has been trying to play matchmaker. Word travels fast. Small town, the doctor said with a slight smile. For what it is worth, I think you could do worse. Kendra is a fine young woman, strong, capable, kind-hearted. She would be a good mother, and you would be a good father if you gave yourself the chance. Tanner was not sure about that, but he appreciated the vote of confidence. He thanked the doctor and left, his mind churning with thoughts and doubts. He rode back to the homestead, where he found Kendra hanging laundry on the line behind the house. She wore a faded blue dress and her hair was pulled back in a simple braid. She looked up as he approached, shielding her eyes against the sun. "How is Catherine this morning?" he asked as he dismounted. "Sleeping. She had a difficult night." Kendra pinned up a sheet and reached for another. "The pain is getting worse." Tanner carried the supplies into the house, setting them on the kitchen table. When he came back outside, Kendra had finished with the laundry and was sitting on the porch steps, her hands folded in her lap. He sat down beside her, leaving a respectful distance between them. "I have been thinking about what Catherine asked," he said. Kendra turned to look at him, her expression guarded. "So have I. I talked to Doc Matthews. He confirmed what we already know. Catherine does not have much time. And he said a baby would need full-time care from both a father and a mother." "I know." Kendra's voice was soft. "I helped my mother with my younger brothers before they grew up. I know what is involved." Tanner took a deep breath. "I want to do right by Samuel, by his memory and by his child. But I also do not want to force you into anything you do not want. This has to be your choice as much as mine." Kendra was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the valley spread below them. Finally, she said, "I came west looking for a new life. My parents died, my brothers left, and I had nothing keeping me in Missouri. I thought I would find work, maybe as a teacher or a seamstress, and build a life for myself here. I never expected to fall in love or get married. Those things seemed like luxuries I could not afford." She turned to face him. "But Catherine is my closest friend in this world. She has been there for me when I had no one else. If I can give her peace in her final days by promising to care for her child, then I will do it, even if it means marrying a man I barely know." The honesty in her words struck something deep inside Tanner. You should not have to sacrifice your future for someone else's peace of mind. "It would not be a sacrifice," Kendra said. "I want children someday. I want a family. This is just happening sooner and differently than I expected. But if you are willing to be a true husband and father, not just in name but in deed, then I am willing to try." Tanner looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the determination in her eyes. This was not a woman who made decisions lightly. She was choosing this path with full awareness of what it meant. He found himself respecting that, admiring it even. "I have never been a husband before," he admitted. "Never stayed in one place long enough to even think about it. I have been a drifter my whole adult life. But Samuel put down roots here. He built this house with his own hands, started a herd, made plans for the future. If I am going to honor his memory, maybe I need to learn how to do the same." "So you are saying yes?" Kendra asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am saying I will try. I will marry you if you will have me. I will be a father to that baby, and I will do my best to be a good husband to you. I cannot promise love, at least not right away. But I can promise respect and honesty and loyalty. That is the best I can offer." Kendra extended her hand to him. "Then we have an agreement." He took her hand, her skin warm and soft against his calloused palm. They shook on it, sealing their fate with a simple gesture. Then they went inside to tell Catherine. The dying woman's face lit up with joy when they broke the news. She was propped up in bed, so thin and pale that she looked like a ghost already. But her smile was radiant. "Thank you," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you both. You have given me the greatest gift. I can leave this world knowing my baby will be loved." "We will love this child as our own," Kendra promised, leaning down to embrace her friend. "I swear it." Catherine reached for Tanner's hand. "And you will take care of each other. You will try to make a real life together." "We will try," Tanner said and meant it. "Then I need you to promise me one more thing," Catherine said. "Get married before the baby comes. I want to see it. I want to know it is official before I go." Tanner and Kendra exchanged glances. "The baby could come any day now," Kendra pointed out, "and you should not be moved." "Then have the wedding here," Catherine insisted. "Just a simple ceremony. The preacher can come here, please. It would mean everything to me." How could they refuse a dying woman's last request? Tanner rode back to town that afternoon and spoke to Reverend Walsh, who agreed to perform the ceremony the next day. He also stopped by the general store and bought a simple gold band that would serve as a wedding ring. Mrs. Henderson insisted on wrapping it in a piece of silk ribbon, her eyes misty. "I always hoped you would settle down, Tanner Knox," she said. "Samuel would be proud of you for doing this." The next day dawned clear and hot, the kind of scorching August morning that made everything shimmer in the heat. Tanner dressed in his best shirt and pants, such as they were, and tried to calm the nervous fluttering in his stomach. He was getting married, actually married, to a woman he had barely spoken to a week ago. It was madness, but when he arrived at the homestead and saw Kendra waiting on the porch, something shifted inside him. She wore a simple cream-colored dress that someone had altered to fit her, and she had woven wildflowers into her hair. She looked beautiful and terrified in equal measure. "Ready?" he asked. "No," she admitted, "but let us do it anyway." They went inside together. Catherine had insisted on being moved to a chair near the window so she could witness the ceremony properly. Doc Matthews was there to monitor her condition, and a handful of townspeople had gathered to serve as witnesses. Reverend Walsh stood in the center of the small room, his Bible open in his hands. The ceremony was brief and simple. Tanner and Kendra stood before the preacher and repeated the vows that bound them together for life, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death parted them. Tanner slipped the ring onto Kendra's finger, his hand steady despite the chaos of emotions inside him. When Reverend Walsh pronounced them husband and wife, Kendra looked up at him with those whiskey-colored eyes, and Tanner felt the full weight of what he had just done crash over him. He leaned down and kissed her, a chaste press of lips that lasted only a moment but seemed to change everything. When he pulled back, he saw the blush rising in her cheeks, the surprise in her expression. Around them, the small gathering applauded, and Catherine wept with joy from her chair. "It is done," she said, her voice weak but triumphant. "My baby will have parents, a real family." The gathering dispersed soon after, leaving Tanner and Kendra alone with Catherine and the doctor. Doc Matthews checked Catherine's pulse and shook his head slightly. "She needs to rest," he said quietly. "Her heart is racing. All this excitement has been too much." They helped Catherine back to bed. She gripped Kendra's hand weakly. "Promise me you will be happy," she whispered. "Both of you, do not just go through the motions. Promise me you will try to find joy together." "We promise," Kendra said, her voice thick with tears. After Catherine fell asleep, Tanner and Kendra stood awkwardly in the main room of the house. They were married now, husband and wife, but they were still strangers in so many ways. The reality of their situation settled over them like a heavy blanket. "I should start dinner," Kendra said, breaking the silence. "I will tend to the animals," Tanner replied. They moved in opposite directions, each grateful for the distraction of work. But eventually, the chores were done and darkness fell, and they could not avoid the inevitable any longer. They sat at the table and ate a simple meal of beans and cornbread, making awkward small talk about the weather and the state of the ranch. Finally, Kendra set down her fork and looked at him directly. "We need to talk about the sleeping arrangements." Tanner felt heat rise in his face. "I will take the barn, you should have the house." "That does not make sense. You are my husband now, you should sleep in your own home." She paused, then added, "There is a spare room. Samuel was going to turn it into a nursery. You could sleep there if you want. Until we are more comfortable with each other." The thoughtfulness of the suggestion touched him. "That sounds fair." They cleaned up the dishes together, working in companionable silence. Then Kendra checked on Catherine one more time before retreating to the main bedroom, and Tanner made up a bedroll in the small room that was meant to be a nursery. He lay awake for a long time, staring at the ceiling, wondering what on earth he had gotten himself into. Over the next few days, they fell into a rhythm. Tanner worked on repairs around the property and tended to the small herd of cattle Samuel had started. Kendra cooked and cleaned and cared for Catherine, whose condition continued to deteriorate. In the evenings, they would sit together on the porch after Catherine had fallen asleep, talking about small things at first and then, gradually, about deeper matters. Tanner learned that Kendra had been teaching herself to read advanced literature, that she had dreams of opening a school someday. Kendra learned that Tanner had grown up in Texas, that he had lost his own parents to cholera when he was 16, that he had been wandering ever since, looking for something he could never quite name. "Maybe you were looking for a home," Kendra suggested one evening as they watched the sun set over the mountains. "Maybe," Tanner agreed. He glanced at her profile, the way the fading light caught in her hair. "What about you? What were you looking for when you came west?" "A purpose," Kendra said. "A reason to wake up in the morning that was mine alone, not something inherited or expected. I wanted to matter to someone." "You matter to Catherine. You matter to that baby. And you," she asked, turning to look at him. "Do I matter to you?" The question caught him off guard. He thought about it, really thought about it before answering. "Yes," he said finally. "You do, more than I expected." A smile touched her lips, small but genuine. "You matter to me too." It was a beginning, tentative and uncertain but real. They were building something between them, brick by brick, conversation by conversation. It was not love, not yet, but it was the foundation upon which love might someday grow. 3 weeks after the wedding, Catherine went into labor. It was the middle of the night when her cries woke the household. Kendra was at her side in an instant, and Tanner rode hard for Doc Matthews. By the time they returned, Catherine was in agony, her body too weak to handle the demands being placed upon it. The labor lasted 14 hours. Tanner paced outside like a caged animal, listening to Catherine's screams, feeling utterly helpless. Kendra stayed with her friend the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her brow, whispering encouragement. Doc Matthews worked with grim determination, doing everything he could to save both mother and child. When the baby's first cry pierced the air, Tanner felt his knees go weak with relief. A boy. Samuel's son had entered the world, tiny and red-faced and wailing with the indignation of the newly born. But the joy was short-lived. Catherine's breathing was labored, her pulse thready and weak. "Let me hold him," she whispered. Kendra wrapped the baby in a clean blanket and placed him in Catherine's arms. The dying woman looked down at her son with a love so fierce and pure that it hurt to witness. She traced his tiny features with one finger, tears streaming down her face. "Samuel," she whispered. "We will name him Samuel, after his father." Little Samuel, Kendra agreed. Her own tears falling freely, Catherine looked up at her friend, then gestured weakly for Tanner to come closer. He entered the room and knelt beside the bed, his heart breaking at the sight of Catherine's fading life force. "Take care of my boy," Catherine said, her voice barely audible. "Love him. Teach him about his father. Tell him Samuel was brave and good and loved him so much." "I will," Tanner promised, his voice rough with emotion. "I swear it." Catherine turned to Kendra. "And you, my dearest friend, be happy. Let yourself love and be loved. You deserve that." "I will try," Kendra sobbed. "I promise I will try." Catherine smiled, a peaceful expression settling over her features. She kissed her son's forehead once, twice, 3 times. Then she handed the baby to Kendra. "Go be a family," she whispered. "All 3 of you, be the family I always wanted for my child." Those were her last words. She closed her eyes and slipped away as quietly as a sigh, her suffering finally at an end. Kendra clutched the baby to her chest and wept, and Tanner stood frozen, watching another piece of his old life disappear into death. They buried Catherine beside Samuel on the hill overlooking the valley. It seemed fitting that they should rest together, their love story cut tragically short but never forgotten. Little Samuel was just 3 days old, too young to understand that he had already lost both his parents. But he had new parents now, ready or not, and Tanner was determined not to fail him. The first weeks of parenthood were brutal. The baby woke every 2 hours to feed, screaming at the top of his lungs until Kendra could prepare a bottle with the goat's milk Doc Matthews had recommended. Tanner and Kendra stumbled through their days in a fog of exhaustion, taking turns walking the floor with a crying infant, changing sodden diapers, trying to soothe a tiny human who seemed determined to make his presence known. But something happened in those sleepless nights. As Tanner and Kendra worked together to care for Samuel, they grew closer. They learned to read each other's moods, to anticipate each other's needs. When Kendra was too exhausted to stand, Tanner would take the baby and let her sleep. When Tanner was frustrated and overwhelmed, Kendra would place a gentle hand on his shoulder and remind him that they were in this together. One night, about a month after Catherine's death, Tanner was walking the floor with Samuel when he heard soft footsteps behind him. Kendra appeared in her nightgown, her hair loose around her shoulders. "I thought you were sleeping," Tanner said quietly. "I woke up and you were gone. I wanted to make sure you were all right." She moved closer, looking down at the baby who had finally quieted in Tanner's arms. "You are good with him. I am just doing what needs to be done. No, it is more than that. You care about him, really care." She reached out and touched Samuel's tiny hand, and the baby's fingers curled around hers instinctively. "Catherine was right about you. You are a good man, Tanner Knox." He looked at her in the dim lamplight, at the softness in her expression, and felt something shift inside his chest. "You are a good woman, Kendra Knox, better than I deserve." She met his eyes, and the air between them seemed to thicken. "Maybe we both deserve a chance at happiness, even if it did not start the way we expected." Tanner found himself leaning closer, drawn by something he could not name. "Kendra, But before he could finish the thought, Samuel began to fuss again, breaking the moment. Kendra smiled and stepped back. "I will warm a bottle." The moment passed, but it left something behind, a new awareness between them. Tanner found himself thinking about Kendra constantly, noticing small things about her. The way she hummed while she cooked, the gentle patience she showed with Samuel, the strength in her hands when she kneaded bread dough, the light in her eyes when she laughed, which was happening more often now. He started doing small things to make her life easier. He would pick wildflowers and leave them on the kitchen table. He would take on extra chores so she could rest. He would tell her stories in the evenings, tales from his years on the cattle drives, making her laugh with his descriptions of the eccentric characters he had met. Kendra, in turn, began to show her affection in subtle ways. She would pack extra food in his saddlebags when he rode out to check the herd. She would mend his clothes without being asked. She would save the best pieces of meat for his plate. And sometimes, when they passed each other in the house, her hand would brush against his, a fleeting touch that sent electricity through him. Fall arrived, bringing cooler temperatures and the changing of the leaves. Samuel grew from a tiny newborn into a chubby, alert baby who smiled and gurgled and made them both fall deeper in love with him. Tanner found himself marveling at the strange turn his life had taken. 6 months ago, he had been a lone drifter with no ties and no responsibilities. Now he was a husband and a father, and the shocking thing was that he did not want to go back to his old life. This was better. This mattered. One evening in late October, after they had put Samuel to bed, Tanner and Kendra sat by the fire. The nights were getting cold now, and the warmth was welcome. Kendra was mending one of Samuel's small gowns, her needle flashing in the firelight. Tanner was supposed to be looking over the ranch accounts, but he could not concentrate. He kept watching Kendra instead, the graceful movements of her hands, the way her hair fell across her face when she bent over her work. "Kendra," he said suddenly, setting aside the ledger. She looked up, her expression curious. "Yes." He stood and crossed to where she sat, then knelt down beside her chair. "I need to tell you something." Her eyes widened slightly, but she set down her sewing. "I am listening." Tanner took her hand in both of his. "When we got married, I told you I could not promise love. I said I would give you respect and loyalty, but I did not know if I could give you more than that." "I remember," Kendra said softly. "I was wrong." He looked into her eyes, willing her to see the truth in his. "I have fallen in love with you, Kendra. I do not know exactly when it happened. Maybe it was the first time I saw you with Samuel, the way you looked at him with so much tenderness. Maybe it was all those late nights when we worked together to keep him alive, becoming a team without even realizing it. Or maybe it was 100 small moments that added up to something bigger than I expected, but I know it now. I love you." Kendra's eyes filled with tears. "Tanner, you do not have to say it back," he continued quickly. "I just needed you to know. I needed to be honest with you. We started this marriage as a promise to a dying friend, but I want it to be more than that now. I want us to be a real family in every way." Kendra cupped his face in her hands, her tears spilling over. "You foolish, wonderful man. I love you too. I have loved you for weeks now, maybe longer. I was just too afraid to say it, afraid it was one-sided, afraid you were just going through the motions for Catherine's sake." Relief and joy flooded through Tanner. He pulled her down from the chair and into his arms, holding her close. "We are the worst at this," he said with a shaky laugh. "Two people in love, married for months, and we have been tiptoeing around each other like strangers." Kendra laughed too, the sound bright and free. "Then maybe we should stop tiptoeing." He kissed her then, really kissed her. Not the chaste peck from their wedding day, but a deep, passionate kiss that conveyed everything he felt. She kissed him back with equal fervor, her arms wrapping around his neck, her body pressed against his. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Tanner rested his forehead against hers. "I want to be a real husband to you," he said. "In every way, if you want that too." "I do," Kendra whispered. "I want all of it. A real marriage, a real life together." That night, for the first time since their wedding, Tanner did not sleep in the spare room. He joined Kendra in the main bedroom, and they consummated their marriage with tenderness and passion, discovering each other in the most intimate way possible. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in the darkness, Kendra traced patterns on his chest. "You think Catherine would be happy?" she asked quietly. "If she could see us now, I think she would be overjoyed," Tanner said. She wanted this for us. She saw something we could not see ourselves. She was wiser than both of us. That she was. They drifted to sleep in each other's arms, and when Samuel woke in the night, they tended to him together, partners in every sense of the word. The next morning, Tanner woke to find Kendra already up, humming as she prepared breakfast. He came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, kissing her neck. "Good morning, Mrs. Knox," he murmured. She turned in his arms, her face glowing. "Good morning, Mr. Knox." From that day forward, their marriage truly began. They were no longer two people bound by obligation and circumstance. They were a couple bound by love, choosing each other every single day. They worked the ranch together, Tanner teaching Kendra about cattle and horses, Kendra sharing her knowledge of gardening and preserving food. They made plans for the future, talking about expanding the herd, maybe building an addition onto the house. Winter came, harsh and unforgiving in the high country of California. Snow piled up around the homestead and the temperatures plummeted. But inside their home, there was warmth and laughter. Samuel celebrated his first Christmas, too young to understand but delighted by the bright colors of the decorations Kendra made. Tanner carved him a small wooden horse, working on it in secret for weeks. Kendra sewed new clothes for the growing baby, her needle flying as she created tiny shirts and pants. On Christmas Eve, after Samuel was asleep, Tanner surprised Kendra with a gift. It was a delicate silver locket on a chain, with space inside for a small photograph. "I know we do not have a photograph yet," he said as he fastened it around her neck. "But maybe someday we can get one made of the three of us, a family portrait." Kendra touched the locket, her eyes shining. "It is beautiful, thank you." She reached under their bed and pulled out a package wrapped in brown paper. "I have something for you too." Inside was a vest she had made from soft leather, with intricate stitching along the seams. On the inside, she had embroidered their initials and their wedding date. "So you will always remember the day our life together began," she said. Tanner pulled her into his arms, overcome with emotion. "I could never forget. It was the day everything changed." They made love by the firelight, taking their time, savoring each touch and kiss. This was not the frantic passion of new lovers, but something deeper, a connection forged through shared struggles and growing trust. Afterward, as they lay together in contentment, Tanner thought about how far he had come. A year ago, he had been a solitary drifter with no purpose beyond the next job. Now he had a wife he loved, a son he adored, and a place to call home. It seemed impossible, miraculous even, that so much could change in such a short time. Spring arrived with a burst of wildflowers and new life. Samuel was 9 months old now, a happy, curious baby who was learning to crawl and getting into everything. Kendra was patient and attentive, always ready with a smile and a gentle word of guidance. Tanner marveled at her natural ability as a mother, the way she seemed to instinctively know what Samuel needed. One afternoon in May, Tanner was working on fixing a section of fence when he saw Kendra coming toward him across the field. She was carrying Samuel on her hip, and both of them were laughing at something. The sight hit him like a physical blow, the sheer rightness of it, the beauty of his family together in the sunshine. When Kendra reached him, she was slightly out of breath. "I have news," she said, her eyes sparkling. "What kind of news?" She bit her lip, clearly trying to contain her excitement. "I am pregnant." For a moment, Tanner could not process the words. Then their meaning hit him, and he let out a whoop of joy that startled Samuel into wide-eyed surprise. He lifted Kendra off her feet, spinning her around while she laughed and protested that he would make her dizzy. "Are you sure?" he asked, setting her down gently. "Doc Matthews confirmed it this morning. I am about 2 months along. The baby should come in late November or early December." Tanner cupped her face in his hands, kissing her soundly. "This is the best news. The absolute best." He dropped to his knees and placed his hands on her still flat stomach. "Hello in there, little one. I am your papa and I already love you so much." Samuel, not wanting to be left out, reached down and patted Tanner's head, making them both laugh. They walked back to the house together, Tanner's arm around Kendra's shoulders, already making plans for the future. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Unlike Catherine's difficult time, Kendra seemed to bloom with health. She had some morning sickness in the early months, but Tanner was there to hold her hair back and bring her cool water, to rub her back and tell her it would pass. As her belly grew, he would spend hours talking to the baby, telling stories and singing off key lullabies that made Kendra giggle. Summer brought its own challenges, the heat making Kendra uncomfortable in her advanced pregnancy. Tanner did everything he could to make her comfortable, bringing her cool drinks, fanning her when she rested, taking over more of the household chores. Samuel, now toddling around and getting into everything, required constant supervision, but they managed together, a well-oiled team. In late November, on a clear, cold night, Kendra woke Tanner with a gentle shake. "It is time," she said calmly. Tanner was anything but calm. He had been present for Catherine's tragic labor and the memories haunted him. What if something went wrong? What if he lost Kendra? The thought was unbearable, but he forced himself to stay steady for her sake, riding hard for Doc Matthews while a neighbor woman stayed with Kendra and Samuel. This labor was different. It was hard work, certainly, and Kendra was in pain, but she was strong and healthy, and her body knew what to do. Doc Matthews supervised with calm confidence, and 12 hours after the first contraction, a baby girl entered the world, her cries strong and healthy. "A daughter," Doc Matthews announced, placing the squirming infant in Kendra's arms. "Congratulations." Tanner looked down at his wife and daughter, his heart so full he thought it might burst. The baby had a shock of dark hair, and her eyes, when she opened them, were the same whiskey color as her mother's. She was perfect, absolutely perfect. "What should we name her?" Kendra asked, her face radiant despite her exhaustion. Tanner thought for a moment. "Catherine," he said softly. "We could name her Catherine after the friend who brought us together, if you want to." Kendra's eyes filled with tears. "Catherine Knox. It is perfect." They spent the rest of the day in a haze of joy and exhaustion, introducing Samuel to his new baby sister. The toddler was fascinated by the tiny creature, wanting to touch her soft hair and her tiny fingers. Tanner supervised carefully, making sure Samuel was gentle, his heart swelling at the sight of his son's wonder. That evening, after both children were asleep and Kendra was resting comfortably, Tanner stood on the porch looking out at the land that had become his home. A year and a half ago, he had stood at Samuel Hicks's graveside and promised to honor his friend's memory. He had thought it would mean taking care of Catherine and the baby for a while, helping out until they could manage on their own. He had never imagined it would lead to this. A wife he loved with all his heart, 2 children who depended on him, a ranch to build and grow, a future full of possibilities. The door opened behind him and Kendra emerged wrapped in a shawl. "You should be resting," Tanner said, moving to her side. "I could not sleep, too much excitement." She leaned against him and he wrapped his arm around her. "Are you happy, Tanner? Truly happy? More than I ever thought possible," he said honestly. "Some days I have to pinch myself to make sure this is real, that you are real." Kendra turned in his arms, looking up at him. "It is real, all of it. We built this together, you and I. From grief and loss we made something beautiful." "Catherine would be proud," Tanner said. "I think she is proud. Wherever she is watching over us, I think she knows we kept our promise. We loved her son as our own. We built a family." Tanner kissed her forehead. "And we are not done yet. This is just the beginning." They stood together under the stars, two people who had found each other in the most unexpected way, grateful for the strange path that had led them to this moment. The years that followed were filled with the hard work and simple joys of frontier life. Tanner and Kendra worked side by side to build their ranch into something prosperous. They increased the cattle herd, added chickens and pigs, planted an orchard that would take years to mature but promised future abundance. The work was endless from sunup to sundown, but they never complained. This was their dream, their legacy for their children. Samuel grew into a bright, energetic boy who idolized his father and followed him everywhere, eager to learn about ranching and horses. Tanner taught him with patience and pride, showing him how to rope a calf, how to read the weather, how to treat animals with respect. In the quiet moments, he would tell Samuel stories about his birth father, about Samuel Hicks's bravery and kindness, making sure the boy knew where he came from. Catherine, or Katie as they called her, was a sweet, curious girl who favored her mother in looks and temperament. She loved helping Kendra in the garden and the kitchen, her little hands always busy. But she also had a stubborn streak that came out when she wanted to do something she was told she could not, and Tanner both exasperated and delighted in her strong will. When Samuel was 5 and Katie was 3, Kendra gave birth to another son, whom they named Thomas. 2 years later came another daughter, Elizabeth. The house that had once felt too big was now bursting with life and noise and love. Tanner had to build an addition just to accommodate everyone, and he did so with joy, hammering and sawing alongside hired hands from town. The ranch prospered. Tanner's careful management and Kendra's frugal household practices meant they were able to save money and invest back into the property. They bought more land, hired a few ranch hands to help with the growing operation, and became respected members of the Weaverville community. Kendra started the school she had always dreamed of, teaching not only their own children but also the children of other families in the area. She was a natural educator, patient and encouraging, and parents praised her work. Tanner served on the town council, helping to make decisions about Weaverville's growth and development. He was known as a fair man, someone who listened before speaking and always kept his word. The wild drifter he had once been seemed like a distant memory, replaced by this steady, dependable man who had put down roots so deep they could never be torn up. On summer evenings, the whole family would gather on the porch after the day's work was done. Tanner and Kendra would sit on the bench he had built, watching their children play in the yard. Sometimes Tanner would pull out his harmonica and play simple melodies while Kendra sang. The children would dance and laugh, their joy infectious. "You ever miss it?" Kendra asked one such evening after the children had been put to bed. "The freedom of the open road, the life you had before." Tanner thought about it seriously before answering. "Sometimes I miss the simplicity of it," he admitted, "when my only concern was myself and the horse I was riding. But I do not miss the loneliness. I did not even realize how lonely I was until I had this." He gestured at the house, the land, everything they had built. "This is what I was looking for all those years. I just did not know it." Kendra rested her head on his shoulder. "I am glad you found it. I am glad you found me. I am glad you agreed to take a chance on a rough cowboy who did not know the first thing about being a husband or a father." She laughed softly. "You learned fast, and you turned out to be very good at both." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of the ranch. An owl hooted in the distance. The cattle lowed softly in their pasture. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the cottonwood trees Tanner had planted the year they were married. "You think Samuel knows?" Kendra asked quietly. About his birth parents, he knows enough, Tanner said. We have always been honest with him. He knows Catherine was his birth mother, that Samuel Hicks was his birth father, and that they loved him very much. But he also knows we are his parents in every way that matters. I do not think he feels confused about it. I hope not. I want him to feel secure, to know he belongs. He does belong. They all do. This is their home, their family, and nothing will ever change that. As if to prove his point, the sound of little feet padding across the floor interrupted them. Thomas appeared in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. Papa, Mama, I had a bad dream. Kendra held out her arms, and the 4-year-old climbed into her lap, snuggling against her. Tanner reached over and ruffled his son's hair. It is all right, little man. Dreams cannot hurt you. Will you tell me a story? Thomas asked. So Tanner told him a story, making up a tale about a brave cowboy who went on an adventure and learned that the greatest treasure was not gold or glory, but the love of a good family. By the time he finished, Thomas was asleep again, his breathing deep and even. Kendra carried him back to bed, and when she returned, she curled up against Tanner. You are good at that, she said, making up stories. I've had a lot of practice. 4 children will do that to you. She was quiet for a moment, then said, Tanner, there is something I need to tell you. He looked at her, concerned by her tone. What is it? I am pregnant again. Tanner blinked, then a slow smile spread across his face. Again? Are you certain? Very certain. I know the signs by now. She smiled back at him. Number 5. Can you believe it? He pulled her into his arms, laughing. I can believe it. We seem to be quite good at making babies. Are you happy about it? She asked, her voice uncertain. Happy, Kendra, I am thrilled. Every child is a blessing, every single one. He sobered slightly. Are you happy? I know it is a lot of work, another baby. I am happy, she assured him. Tired sometimes, overwhelmed sometimes, but always happy. Our children are the best thing we ever did together. The 5th baby, a boy they named Matthew, was born the following spring. The birth was easy, and Matthew was a calm, content baby who seemed to sense that he had arrived into a busy household and needed to be accommodating. He slept well, ate well, and rarely fussed, much to Kendra's relief. The children adored their new baby brother. Even Samuel, now 8 years old and thinking himself quite grown up, would help by rocking Matthew when he fussed or bringing Kendra things she needed. Katie appointed herself Matthew's special protector, always making sure he had his favorite blanket or toy. Thomas and Elizabeth, still young themselves, were fascinated by the baby and wanted to help with everything. Tanner watched his growing family with pride and gratitude. He had never imagined himself as a father of 5, but he could not imagine his life any other way now. Each child was unique, with their own personality and quirks, and he loved them all fiercely. As the children grew, Tanner made sure to spend individual time with each of them, recognizing that they all needed his attention in different ways. He took Samuel on cattle drives around the property, teaching him the skills he would need to run the ranch someday. He taught Katie to ride, delighting in her fearlessness on horseback. He built things with Thomas, who showed an early aptitude for carpentry. He read to Elizabeth, who was already showing signs of being as much a bookworm as her mother. And with Matthew, he simply spent time playing and cuddling, soaking in the fleeting baby days. Kendra managed the household with grace and efficiency, somehow keeping track of 5 children while also teaching school and helping with ranch work. Tanner marveled at her strength and capability, falling more in love with her with each passing year. She was his partner in every sense, his equal and complement. One day, when they had been married for 10 years, Tanner came in from the fields to find Kendra sitting at the kitchen table with tears streaming down her face. His heart lurched with fear. What is wrong? Is one of the children hurt? She shook her head, then held up a piece of paper. I just received a letter. It is from my brother in Missouri. He found me through the church. Tanner knelt beside her chair. What does it say? He wants to know if I am all right. He says he lost track of me after our parents died, and he has been trying to find me for years. He has a family now, 3 children, and he wants them to know their aunt. Fresh tears spilled over. I thought I would never hear from my family again. I thought I was completely alone in the world except for you and the children. You are never alone, Tanner said, taking her hand. But this is wonderful news. You should write back to him. Maybe they could even come visit sometime. Do you mean it? Kendra asked, hope lighting her face. Of course I mean it. Family is important. If your brother wants to reconnect, we should welcome that. So Kendra wrote back, and a correspondence began. Letters flew back and forth across the miles, filled with news and updates, and the gradual rebuilding of a relationship that had been fractured by distance and circumstance. 2 years later, Kendra's brother William and his family made the journey west to visit. It was a joyful reunion, with Kendra and William both weeping as they embraced for the first time in over a decade. The visit lasted 2 weeks, and in that time, the cousins all became fast friends. William's children were slightly older than most of Tanner and Kendra's, and they delighted in showing the younger ones how to do various things. Tanner and William hit it off immediately, bonding over their shared commitment to family and hard work. On the last night of the visit, as the adults sat on the porch watching the children chase fireflies in the gathering dusk, William turned to Tanner. I want to thank you, he said seriously, for taking care of my sister, for giving her the family and the life she deserved. When I lost track of her, I was sick with worry. But seeing her now, seeing how happy she is, how loved, it puts my heart at ease. I am the one who should be thanking her, Tanner replied. She saved me from a life of drifting and loneliness. She gave me purpose and meaning. Everything good in my life comes from her. Kendra, overhearing, reached over and squeezed his hand. We saved each other, she said softly. After William's family left, life returned to its normal rhythms, but something had shifted. The visit had reminded Tanner and Kendra of how far they had come, of all the connections and relationships they had built. They were not just a couple anymore, or even just a family. They were part of a larger web of people who cared about each other, who supported and loved one another. The children continued to grow, each passing through their own milestones. Samuel turned 18 and took on more responsibility on the ranch, working alongside Tanner as a true partner. He had grown into a fine young man, strong and capable, with his birth father's sense of honor and his adoptive father's steady reliability. He knew the full story of his origins now, and he honored both sets of parents, carrying the name Knox with pride while never forgetting the Hicks who had given him life. Katie blossomed into a beautiful young woman with a fierce independence that both worried and pleased Tanner. She was an accomplished rider and helped break and train the horses they raised on the ranch. She had her mother's intelligence and her father's determination, a combination that made her formidable. Thomas discovered a talent for woodworking and began making furniture that people all over the territory wanted to buy. Elizabeth inherited her mother's love of teaching and began helping in the school, showing a natural gift for working with the younger children. Matthew, the baby of the family, was growing into a thoughtful, quiet boy who loved animals and spent hours caring for the ranch creatures. On Tanner's 40th birthday, the whole family gathered for a celebration. Kendra had made his favorite meal, and the children had all pitched in to make the day special. As Tanner looked around the table at the faces of his wife and children, he felt overwhelmed with gratitude. I want to say something, he announced, standing up. Everyone quieted, looking at him expectantly. 20 years ago, I was a different man. I had no home, no family, no purpose beyond the next job. Then I met your mother and everything changed. She took a chance on a rough cowboy who did not know anything about being a husband or a father. And together, we built this life. This beautiful, messy, wonderful life. He looked at Samuel. Son, I want you to know that being your father has been the greatest honor of my life. You carry two legacies and you do both proud every single day. Samuel's eyes glistened with emotion. Thank you, Pa. Tanner turned to each child in turn, saying something special to each one, acknowledging their unique gifts and personalities. Finally, he looked at Kendra, his voice thick with emotion. And you, my love, you are the reason for all of this. You are the heart of this family, the glue that holds us all together. I love you more today than I did the day we married, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. Thank you for saying yes to a promise made at a dying woman's bedside. Thank you for taking that leap of faith. Kendra stood and crossed to him, wrapping her arms around him. I would say yes 1,000 times over. You are my greatest adventure, Tanner Knox. They kissed, and the children whooped and hollered in the way that children do when their parents show affection. The moment was perfect, a snapshot of a life well lived, a family well loved. As the years continued to pass, Tanner and Kendra grew older together, their hair going gray, their bodies showing the wear of hard work and many years. But their love never diminished. If anything, it deepened, becoming richer and more complex with time. They had weathered storms together, both literal and figurative. They had faced hardships and celebrated triumphs. They had raised 5 children to adulthood, each one going on to build their own lives while staying close to the family ranch. Samuel married a girl from a neighboring ranch and brought her home to live in a house he built on the far corner of the property. They had 3 children of their own, and Tanner and Kendra became grandparents, a role they embraced with joy. Katie eventually married a man who could match her spirit, a cavalry officer who respected her strength. They traveled for his work, but always came home to Weaverville for visits. Thomas opened his own carpentry shop in town and married a quiet girl who appreciated his gentle nature. Elizabeth became a teacher like her mother and married a fellow educator. Matthew stayed on the ranch, never marrying but finding contentment in working the land and caring for the animals he loved. On a warm summer evening in 1912, Tanner and Kendra sat on the porch of the ranch house, now surrounded by the homes of their children and grandchildren. They were both in their 60s, their bodies slower but their minds still sharp. They held hands, watching the sun set over the mountains they had called home for 3 decades. You ever think about that day? Kendra asked quietly. The day Catherine asked us to marry. All the time, Tanner admitted. I think about how scared I was, how certain I was that I could not do what she was asking. And then I think about everything that came after, and I realize it was the best decision I ever made. She knew, Kendra said. Somehow, even dying, she knew we were right for each other. She saw something we could not see. She gave us a gift, Tanner agreed. The gift of each other, the gift of this life. I wish she could have lived to see it all. To see Samuel grow up, to meet the other children, to know that her sacrifice was not in vain. I think she knows, Kendra said. Wherever she is, I think she knows, and I think she is happy. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Around them, they could hear the sounds of their family, grandchildren laughing, their children calling goodnight, the familiar noises of the ranch settling in for the night. We did good, did we not? Tanner said. We kept our promise. We did better than good, Kendra replied. We did not just keep a promise. We built a legacy. We created something that will last long after we are gone. She was right. The ranch would continue, passed down through generations. The love they had built together, against all odds, would ripple out through their children and grandchildren and beyond. What had started as a deathbed promise had become something far greater than either of them could have imagined. Tanner lifted Kendra's hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "I love you, Mrs. Knox. Today, tomorrow, and forever." "I love you too, Mr. Knox. Always and always." They remained on the porch until the night grew cool, content in each other's presence, grateful for every moment they had been given. Their story had begun with death and grief, but it had become a testament to the power of love, commitment, and the promises we keep. Catherine Hicks had asked for a miracle at her bedside, and in keeping that promise, Tanner and Kendra had discovered that miracles are real. They come in the form of unexpected love, growing families, and a life built together one day at a time. Years later, when both Tanner and Kendra had passed on peacefully in their old age, their children and grandchildren would gather and tell the story of how their family began. They would speak of Catherine's sacrifice, of the cowboy who kept his promise, of the two strangers who became soulmates. And they would remember that love, true love, can bloom even in the hardest soil, even in the face of death and loss. It just needs two hearts willing to take a chance, to make a promise and to keep it, no matter what. The Knox family ranch still stands today, a testament to the love story that began with a dying woman's last wish. And on quiet evenings, when the wind blows just right across the valley, some say you can still hear the sound of laughter from the porch, the echoes of a family built on love, sacrifice, and a promise kept at a bedside so many years ago.